She just ruined my surprise, which is that I've been living with a brain injury for 40 years. And, well, actually, next year will mark the 40th year I've been living with a traumatic brain injury. And as you'd expect, the last 40 years have been a time of many ups and downs for me, a time which would be difficult to sum up in a short presentation. So I'm going to start by making a statement which is kind of going to date myself here, and at the risk of sounding like an old fart, I'm going to paraphrase what we used to say about a Grateful Dead concert. It said, as you know, there is nothing like living with a brain injury. Nothing. Let me elaborate. Over the last 40 years or so, I've been many things. I've been angry, I've been lonely and depressed, I've been frustrated, and yes, at times I've been euphoric. I've wondered if I would ever get through a day without thinking about my TBI and what that long-awaited day would be like. I've done things that made me think I was all better and that I could move on with my life. I've worried that I never would reach the peace and tranquility I wanted so bad. And then, out of the blue, I went through a wondrous day of not thinking about my TBI. Completely took me by surprise. It was incredibly joyful. I had one of the most amazing moments of my life when I realized I hadn't thought about it once all day. And I realized a little bit of what the future could be like. But then, just as abruptly, I learned that experiencing that joy was like a mirage. It happened, and then poof, it was gone. Sorry. I was left broken by the side of the road, worrying about what was next and if I would ever really recover. I learned that having that poof, that feeling of joy that didn't mean I was recovered, but that the joy I felt was just one thing, one moment in my life that I needed to learn how to appreciate. I'm certain each of us has had many ups and downs. Over the years, my TBI at times has played a huge, overwhelming role in my life. But I've gotten to the point where it has, for the most of the part, become an afterthought, an interesting footnote to my life, or something that I, rightly or wrongly, continue to blame things on. At one point, I think I went 10 years without talking about it. But then that damn brain injury reared its ugly head. That taught me that it's always lurking, ready to pounce on unsuspecting me if I let it. Now, 39, almost 40 years into it, because of the relationship I have with my brain injury, the positives, or what it has given me, and which I sometimes have to really search for, outweigh the negatives. My TBI created who I am today, as it has perhaps for many of you. As survivors, we have this bond, this thing that connects us. We've all gone through the common experience of brain injury, but we've all gone through something else that comes with this experience. And this is something is our way of relating to the world, explaining what happened to us, how we fought against great odds to get where we are today, and how we survived. We call this our story. Our story is how we triumphed over our brain injury because, make no mistake about it, no matter how you feel about it or how you look at it, and despite the daily challenges we all face, each of you is an example of being triumphant over adversity. I know this because you're all here today. So give yourselves a hand. All right, there, you deserve it. I have always been very proud of my story, as I'm sure all you have, and you should be proud of your story. Let's face it, in the short run especially, our story becomes practically the most important thing to us because it seems like that's all we have anymore. We lose so much from a TBI, and our story makes us feel alive, as if we matter. Our story represents us and is our essence, and it makes us feel important. Not only is that story important to us, it is important to other survivors looking for inspiration or a glimmer of hope in the face of loss. And it is our way of relating to a world we often feel lost in. Our story is a reminder to us of what happened, how it wasn't all bad, and that, yes, we did have some accomplishments and triumphs that matter to us, even though others may not realize how hard we had to work to get what we have. Our story helps us to understand some things that might not make sense, and is a way of explaining what has happened and how we deal with it. Very simply, our story starts out with us as individuals, pre-TBI, and how we are all equipped with our own toolbox. What sort of things are in our toolbox? Well, our toolbox holds those physical and mental abilities that make us who we are and play such a large role in our daily lives. We grow up with these tools and learn how to use them in all kinds of situations, whether the tool is humor, empathy, mathematics, high jumping, or even singing. We become skilled in using them, and generally in using them at the right time. A brain injury plays havoc with our toolbox. Some tools are left bent and contorted, and some are lost for good, while others get misplaced temporarily, and we need to find them and reclaim them. While it is necessary and important to learn and relearn those skills and abilities or tools in order that we function in society, our family units, etc., we need to go beyond simply regaining our tools in order to learn how to be a human being and live a fulfilled life. Yes, learning or relearning tools is very important. These are the everyday tasks that allow us to participate, feel whole, worthwhile, and a member of society. But just learning the tasks and tools we use in life is not enough. Once we've learned them, we need to be able to use them appropriately, powerfully, and with purpose. Only by regaining our sense of self and our ability to function as human beings will we be able to come full circle so we can use these tools as they were intended. So here's what it looks like. We suffer some sort of brain injury. Maybe we're in the hospital, maybe we're not. But in order to rebuild our toolboxes, we are guided by the light of the word recovery. Imagine this big sign out in the distance, red flashing neon sign with the word recovery on it. We all want to get there, but what really is this thing we call recovery? The dictionary.com definition of recovery is, quote, the regaining of or possibility of regaining something lost or taken away. Applying that definition to us means we want to get ourselves and our lives back because that was what we lost. There was a reason that big red sign in the distance that says recovery, that is so inviting we all want to get to, is so hard to reach. As you know, recovery is a tall task, a daunting task. We need to take a hard look at what we are doing, and we might even want to ask ourselves a question that we might not like. That question is recovery even possible? I can tell you from personal experience that recovery is one tough, thankless pursuit. The word recovery brings with it all sorts of expectations for getting back what was lost or taken away. Promoting recovery as a goal can put the individual in a difficult, no-win situation where you don't succeed unless you return to life the way you used to have it. You're always fighting just to get back to where you used to be. It's kind of like slogging your way up a muddy hill, finally reaching the top, losing your grip, and sliding back down, and then starting the whole process all over again, trying to reach the top, slogging through the mud. So the bad news I have to tell you is that we may not recover according to the dictionary.com definition. We may not get back what was taken away. However, the good news is that what we're able to do is discover new strengths, likes and dislikes, ways of being, and our place in the world. This process of discovery allows us to come up with new ways which can allow us not only to function, but be successful. In some cases, life takes on a new and fulfilling direction. Using the word discovery when we talk about the period following a brain injury allows us to change the direction and emphasis of this period. This is a tough and thankless time, regardless of what we call it, and it can be looked at in a couple of ways. Either as a time full of frustration and anger as we work to recapture what we have lost, which is recovery, or it is a time full of frustration, anger, and hope as we explore our capabilities and our new future, which is discovery. Discovery is a time of growth and learning. Our interests lie in knowing not what we used to be able to do, but what life is like for us now and what makes us tick as human beings. As difficult as it is, discovery is also laced with those glowing moments of understanding, the epiphanies and realizations which just blow you away. Through discovery, you have the opportunity to add to your story, avoiding the danger of being trapped by your story or stuck in it. The world appears as our laboratory, with us being given the opportunity to grow and learn about ourselves through discovery, able to use the tools we have worked so hard to reclaim. Moving forward is the focus, and discovering who we are and how we fit in the world can add to the beauty of being alive. Through discovery, we have the opportunity to not only rebuild our toolbox, but to create a new life, free from the shackles of a past life. We are determined to move forward, discovering new capabilities and parts of ourselves, open to new opportunities, ready to experience what the world has to offer in new, meaningful ways. With discovery, we are not only talking about what we do, but also who we are. You aren't just a person who wants to be able to function and return to work in the same capacity as before. Who you are is that individual who strives to live a fulfilled life and accepts obstacles for what they are, things to either be moved or worked around. Who you are is also the person who interacts with family or others you have relationships with, or learns how to function in complex social situations or confusing and distracting environments. Who you are isn't always a bed of roses. But who you are is waiting to be discovered. It's very hard to find out who you are when there has been so much change. Your notions of yourself are colored, not only by your own thoughts, but also by others' impressions of you. For example, I couldn't understand why my old friends shunned me after I returned to college. This made my life there so much more confusing and nerve-wracking until I learned to abandon my thoughts of returning to what I was, and instead began to create a new life for myself based on who I had become. I wasn't sure who I had become, but I was willing to find out. Discovering who I had become wasn't just about the things I was able to do. Those were the things that would get me moving and make me feel useful, but they weren't going to fulfill me like my familial or social relationships. We have to learn again how you react in light social situations and in emotional, highly charged ones. How to function in crowds and under pressure. How much stimulation you can take before you reach the breaking point, etc. Discovery is not just about whether you can walk, talk, remember, and read, etc., although they are all important parts of being able to function. Discovery is about who we are as human beings in relation to the rest of the world. Through discovery, we can begin to write a new, fulfilling story. The question you might ask is, why do I need to write a new story? You might say, my life is tough enough without having to do all this extra work, and you're probably right. However, we need to look at the big picture here. This is your life, your one shot. By writing a new story, what we are doing is creating a meaningful life. Not that your life isn't meaningful now, but we want to see if it can go further than we ever thought we could by looking at our brain injury differently. In reality, writing a new story is all about the way we relate to our brain injury. The way we relate to our brain injury goes a long way to determining whether we are successful in achieving our goals and in living a fulfilled life. There are any number of ways we can relate to our brain injury. Some examples are, 1, We can refuse to accept the new reality we are faced with and instead attempt to go about our lives as if we never experienced a brain injury. Or we could choose to continuously fight it, just keep knocking our heads against the wall. Or we could decide we are going to coexist and do the best we can. These are just a few of the ways we can choose to relate to our brain injuries. What it really boils down to is this: what works best for you? You are the one who needs to figure out how you best relate to your brain injury and how you want to live your life. However, I will say right here that one thing you don't want to do is be controlled by your brain injury. What does it mean to be controlled by your brain injury? Well, before we answer, we need to make an important distinction. Of course, a brain injury is going to affect your life in a major way, and it is going to have an influence on just about everything you do. However, it is not going to control you unless you let it. Whether you realize it or not, if your brain injury controls you, it is because of a conscious or subconscious decision, and most likely over time, it becomes an ingrained behavior. Let's look at the control question by breaking it down into a series of questions so it's easier to answer. First, does your life revolve around that date etched in your mind when your life changed? Does everything you do come back to that damn brain injury? Does that voice in your head constantly tell you that you are unable to do this or that? Maybe you don't want to try something because you think you know things will turn out badly, or maybe the opposite is true. You keep forgetting things turn out badly, and you do things anyway, setting yourself up for failure. Perhaps you're anxious and overly protective of yourself, and it all comes back to changes you have experienced due to that damn brain injury. Now, we all go through stages after brain injury, like the time just after it happens when our world is completely rocked. Maybe we go through a denial stage. Maybe we just give up for a while. Maybe we go to the state of blaming everything on it, or have incredible anger. It is necessary to go through one or all of these stages. But what we need to keep in front of us is that we want to come out the other end, and we don't want to be stuck in any one of these places. There are times, especially early on after a brain injury, when you're going to be controlled by your brain injury, and there is nothing you can do about it. This whole experience has been such a cataclysmic event in your life, you can't help but be influenced and controlled by it. However, over time, with the help of tools such as discovery and resetting zero, which I'm not going to be able to cover here, but I do cover in my book, you can build a life such that you are not controlled by your brain injury. How do we stop being controlled by it? We can start by not making self-deprecating jokes about ourselves or poking fun at ourselves when we mess up. Taking ourselves seriously is scary, but you have to remember that that you are not your brain injury. You are a serious, thoughtful individual who is learning to deal with a huge event in your life. The jokes and silliness are defensive mechanisms we use to put ourselves and our others at ease. Without them, we don't have armor to protect us. We leave ourselves vulnerable. But this is a necessary step in learning to treat ourselves the way we want to be treated by others. There is a big shift here in how we treat ourselves and how we expect to be treated by others. We deserve to be treated with dignity, respect, and we must work on being that person who is taken seriously and contributes. How do we get taken seriously? Well, your movements and actions are purposeful, and you look upon yourself as a person living in the world in a new, meaningful way. By purposeful, I mean that what you do is thought out as best you can, and what you do has meaning and is important. There are no wasted actions. This is all about how you look at yourself in relation to the world. Being controlled by your brain injury is like being stuck in the muck. We are buffeted by all these emotions: anger, frustration, confusion, and we have our feet planted firmly in the thick black muck. You know, you're like one of those weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. You're just being blown around by the wind, but you don't fall down, and then when you get blown over, you bounce back up. But we can't pull our feet out of the muck, and we're left swaying this way and that with our feet rooted, while our upper body feels the gale force of the brain injury winds. The paradox is, the more that we struggle, the faster we get sucked in. This is the time and place where you have to stop looking inward and not be so self-possessed, a difficult thing when you've had a brain injury. But you need to instead pick your head up and look off at that pinhole of light in the distance. See if you can follow it and let it guide you. That pinhole of light off in the distance represents a future of not being controlled by your brain injury. So we can't escape it. Our brain injury controls us from the beginning, and it is affecting us even when we think it isn't, even when we think we've got everything figured out. Having our brain injury take over our life is going to happen because it is part of the normal progression. Even though our brain injury was at one time the center of our universe, we don't have to be controlled by it forever. The key to breaking away from being controlled by it is how we relate to it and integrate it into our life. By this, I mean our brain injury no longer becomes how it has affected our life, but it is about how we coexist with it. One way to look at this is to examine not only how our brain injury has negatively affected parts of our lives, but also how it has added to our lives. When you can do this, you have reached the tipping point, the point at which you realize that while being controlled by your brain injury isn't exactly a choice you make, you can make a choice to not be controlled by it. While the choice itself is easy, making that choice a reality isn't. The seeds are planted in you early on for how you're going to relate to your brain injury. We are affected by such things as the nature of the injury, the trauma we suffered, genetics, and any environmental factors like the presence of support systems, positive role models, socioeconomic factors, etc. So in some ways, our reaction to our brain injury is predetermined, and it may take real work to break the mold so that we can make good choices and make them a reality. However, there is a logical starting point, and this is the moment we make a stand for ourselves and declare that we are going to be victors rather than victims. The transition to the point where we become a victor is not easy, but the moment you make the commitment to begin that transition is the moment you put yourself on the road to victory. Being on this road to victory is not about what you can or can't do, or what you used to be able to do. It is about how you view yourself, how you treat yourself, and the choice you have just made to live your life the best way you can with the tools you have. Deciding to be a victor doesn't make anything any easier. It may even make things harder. But being a victor gives your life back to you. All you really have to do is make a stand for yourself. This may take some time. It may mean adopting new goals or resetting old ones. It may mean changing how you define yourself, and it will mean changing how you think about yourself. This also might mean you have to make a major realignment in what you think life should be and how it should be lived. But keep in mind that we are looking for ways to live a successful, fulfilled life, and it won't be easy. The trick is, you've got to start somewhere. Start by making a stand and being that person you always wanted to be, who believes in his or herself, is trusted by others, and who doesn't use your brain injury for an excuse. Thank you.